Good afternoon. We're back on the scene. This is Joe Ryan, and tonight we have the pleasure of having Chris Russo, the Mad Dog, one of the pioneers of sports talk radio, to sit in here with us tonight. Chris, welcome. Thank you for coming in.
Great to be here.
Great to see you. You know, Chris, to start off, because we're a local show, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about being a sports parent. You know, your job, you're one of the pundits of sports. You talk a lot about coaches, players. Sometimes you have to be critical. And you are kind of a voice of the people. And now you've raised kids and you've given them the love of the sport. And you're dealing, I've seen you in the stands. You're very understated and stuff.
Sometimes.
Okay, but I mean, is it a conscious effort with you? What about sport? You hear about parents getting a bad rap this year now about how they treat their kids and the coaches. What do you think goes on now?
Well, I think I would do a lot differently now that I've had some experience. I probably was a little too enthusiastic at times with now he's a freshman in college, when he was in high school, where, I kind of lived it through him. It's probably a part of my life where I was looking for a little something different outside of doing daily sports talk and what have you. I was looking for a little diversity, a little something different, and he kind of provided that for me. And I think the one thing a parent's got to realize, you can't live through you vicariously through your kid. It's about him, not you. And it took me a long while to realize that. I think since he has left, I've kind of mellowed it out a little bit with the others, and I don't take it quite as seriously. But there was a period there where I would say about a 6-year period, where I go to every AAU weekend basketball tournament. I go to every high school basketball game. I tape endings of shows to run to high school gyms across Fairfield County, whether they be in Norwalk, Brian McMahon, Greenwich, you name it. I basically went through hula hoops to make sure I can see him play. I tried not to be critical. I tried to keep my mouth shut. I got on the referees probably too much. I didn't like how at times he was coached, but I tried to stay away from that as best I could. But at times I probably got a little carried away. So, I mean, I think I would do it differently if one of my other two sons, one's been injured, the other one's just getting started, I'll probably handle a little differently with those two. But I think I was a little too exuberant, and I think that's the problem with parents. I think they live a little too much through their kids' sports activities, and I think sometimes you got to separate yourself. And a lot of parents don't do that. I didn't do it either. A lot of parents don't do that as well. They want to win too much, and I think I got involved in that a little bit too much. So I'm not unbelievably pleased at times the way I handle myself. I generally try to stay away, but it's tricky. It's hard. There's your kid playing.
Yeah, exactly. And also, a lot of the kids, what I find with a lot of parents today is the expectations. I mean, a lot of them see that college, hopefully scholarship, and you can't blame with the price of college today. A lot of these people need that help.
Right.
But I mean, every kid isn't meant to play college sports.
Right, exactly.
It's tough. It's tough. I mean, you've spoken to some of the great coaches, Coach K, Roy Williams, down the line. You've coached all these guys, and you know the recruiting. They're recruiting how many guys at the same time?
And very difficult. And I think you're right. I think a lot of parents look at their kids as a way that they can get to college through their athletic achievement. I did not look at it that way because I knew my children on that level. So I never looked at it quite that way, but I think a lot of parents do. I think they look at it, college is expensive, so maybe they look at that to help them financially, whatever the reason. But a lot of people look at kids playing high school sports as an avenue for them to get to. I think that's why you see lacrosse being so successful and so popular, because a lot of kids, there's a little more opportunities. A lot of schools starting lacrosse programs, there's a little bit more opportunity there. I did not look at it that way. I only looked at it as a way that I wanted to enjoy the games that he was playing at the time. If my oldest kid was good enough to play, Division III or Division II basketball, I would have been delighted and I would have gone to every game. But I did not look at college as a way that he was going to be able to financially help the family. So I didn't look at it from a scholarship perspective. I would have loved to have seen it, but, you can't push them. Some kids athletically are not at that level, other kids are. So I didn't really pay too much. I didn't worry too much about college, but you're right. A lot of parents look at their kids, whatever the sport they play, as a way that they can be successful in college and get an education. I think that's fine as long as you tone it down with the enthusiasm level. I think that's what it comes down to. You can't treat every game from youth basketball or youth lacrosse to senior in high school as Game 7 of the World Series. And a lot of parents do that.
And a lot of times I get the feedback because I talk to a lot of coaches around here, how tough it is dealing with the parents. Is it important for you as a parent to pick the right coach? Is there a way to pick the right coach, the right program to go to, do you think? What kind of advice would you give a parent there?
Well, that depends how good your kid is. If your kid is excellent and he's a kid who can play at any level, then you can sort of pick and choose where you want to play high school sports. If your kid isn't so excellent and he's at your high school and he plays and he's sort of a fit-in kind of guy, I mean, what are you going to do? You can't take him to a private school. That's where he plays, so you got to live with the coaching. I've had trouble with the coaches. There's some situations where I would have liked to have seen a little something different handled. And, I never approached the coaches necessarily about it. I try to stay away. I try to let the coaches coach. Sometimes I was more successful of allowing that to happen than others. There was a time I probably would get frustrated. But, from a standpoint of picking your coach, it depends. If your kid's great and he can go play high school basketball anywhere he wants to play, and he can go on to college from there, well, then he can pick where he wants to go play.
Right.
I didn't have that luxury. So
right.
If I did, I would pick the program that I thought best served him, and I would probably pick the coach that I thought he would get the most out of Tim or any of my other 3, 4 kids. But, I also think there's something to play in your high school, too. I think we've lost that. Especially in basketball, I think we've lost that where everybody runs to the prep school. And, outside of the parents at the prep school, nobody cares how the prep school is doing.
Right.
If you play well in your town, well, then there's a little something that the town is appreciative of. Whether a kid plays great at a prep school, who cares? The town doesn't care. Prep school is on its own. But if you play well at the high school, there is a town community feel to it that you don't get at a prep school level. Right. But the level of basketball or whatever the sport is better at the prep school level. So it's a tricky call. I was not ever in that situation where I could choose and figure out the best avenue for my kid to be a great athlete in. So I didn't worry about that too much. I let him play the high school sports. I went to every game. I was enthusiastic. I tried to support him at times. I kept my mouth shut with him. Sometimes he'd be annoyed, so I kept my mouth shut. If after a bad game, I probably wouldn't say anything. I would pick my spots. But like every parent, I erred there too, and probably I should have kept my mouth shut when he wasn't feeling great, and I discussed it. You can't have more passion than your kid.
Right.
And I sometimes have more passion than him, and you can't. You got to have him have the passion.
When you talk about passion, because I've listened to you for years, and your love of the sport started very young. I remember you telling the story of how you became a San Francisco Giant fan by stumbling across Willie McCovey and Willie Mays in a hotel lobby.
Right, exactly.
And do the kids today have that same love? Has social media and the 24-hour news network when you and I were growing up, we got to see local teams. You saw the Mets, you saw the Yankees, and that was it.
Right.
And then maybe on the weekend, we'd get to see the Giants against the Dodgers, or one of those teams when they used to have the NBC game of the week and stuff like that. You really had a hunger for the sports pages, the box scores, and everything else.
Right.
Now these kids with social media, they get it right away, and they get to know what's going on. Plus, on top of it, with Instagram and the tweeting and stuff, players put out there right away, and sometimes they tell us stuff maybe we shouldn't want to know or should know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think first off, when you go to watch if you're in a stadium for a college football game, and even with my kids, the game's on, they're on a phone. Colin, the game's in front of you. It's not on your phone, but they're tweeting their friends and all those kinds of things. The passion's different. I noticed that the young kid today, when I have the 2 who follow sports, they don't know anything about the broadcasters. You and I knew about Vince Scully. We knew about Bob Murphy and Ralph Kiner and Lindsey Nelson. We knew about Marv Albert. Kids today don't know that stuff. They're not as wrapped up on the broadcasters. Their passion is not quite the same. They get wrapped up in the fantasy. They get a little more wrapped up in their fantasy teams than they think about necessarily as far as the team has. They'd rather see their players do well in fantasy than they would actually the team win. I think baseball is a sport that's taking the biggest hit with this. You and I grew up with transistor radios. We grew up with box scores. We grew up with, getting this, can't wait to see what Willie Mays did or what McCovey did or what Mantle did.
Right.
And the kids today don't do that, especially in baseball.
Right.
The young teenager, with rare exception, is not really as wrapped up in the long 162-game season that is baseball compared to, say, football and even in the NBA. They think the season's too long, the games are too long, 9 innings, 3.5 hours, it's 7 months a year. They might get wrapped up in a postseason, but in a regular season, not nearly as interested. At least that's what I have found compared to what you and I did in our day. I think they are distracted. I think that they got much more information, as you said, so they're more aware of all the teams, but they don't live and die necessarily with each team like, say, you and I did. I lived and died with Giant games. I lived and died with Green Bay Packers football games. My 15-year-old or 16-year-old now, he lives and dies with the Jaguars. He's a big Jaguar fan. But it's not the end of the world if they lose. For you and I, it was.
Right.
And I think the social media and, having all the buddies on the phone and, all their apps, I think that has taken away a little of the passion for the kid following sports today.
But then the flip side of the coin is they get to see LeBron playing Cleveland against Chicago, where you and I never got to see Oscar Robertson at his best.
Correct.
We only really got to see him when he played for Milwaukee.
Yeah. They played for the Bucks later on.
Yeah,
we didn't see him with the Royals.
No, we never
100%.
get to see his best game. So, these guys do get to see that. How about the aspect of getting, of losing, maybe they're not as much put up on a pedestal? Is it better they think of these people more as human beings rather than they idolize the way you and I used to?
I agree. I don't think there's the idolization because they see all the warts when you and I didn't do that. But I think they are so wrapped up with celebrityhood that I think the kid today is wrapped up with, how many followers a certain player has. If he shows up at an event, they can't wait to see it. They're much more wrapped up in that. I don't care what a player does off the court. I'm not that interested.
No.
I'm interested as what he does between the lines, between the sidelines, between the hash marks. I'm more wrapped up in that. And the kid today, I think, is more wrapped up in the celebrity aspect of an athlete. Where is Durant hanging out? Where is LeBron playing next year? Who is at the, which football player went to the Laker game last night? LeVar Ball, Alonzo, and the old man, Alonzo Ball and the old man. We weren't wrapped up in that in those days. I was wrapped up in watching the players play. Today, there's so many extracurricular activities, I think it's a little lost on the performance level on the field compared to what they're doing off the court. I think that's the difference.
Yeah, and you hate to, because we are, I'm part of the media around here. You're a large part of the national media, and the media takes a bad rap a lot of times for, right now, every media is blamed for everything, from you-know-what to you-know-what. But you got a guy like LeVar Ball, who right now is kind of making a mockery out of sports parenting. And
well, he's tough. Yeah,
he is tough, but it's part of this generation to put him out there and give him the audience. There's no way to stop it.
And the media gives him way too much publicity.
Yeah.
The media just can't wait to hear what he had to say. I think they're off it now, but they were on it for a long time. You got to remember, there's a lot more media people now. There's a lot more, as you said, there's a lot more ways to get your media point out. I think the athletes have learned, why deal with media guys when I can control my own information, and I can do Instagram, and I got my own Twitter feed. So I'll tell you when I'm going to do it. I won't go through a team. I won't hold a press conference. I'll just put it on Twitter. It's a different world now from a media perspective. The closeness with the athlete today and the media person doesn't nearly exist as it did in the old days. The media has at times taken liberties they shouldn't have taken. There's much more of an adversarial role between, I'm not talking about high school sports, I'm talking about the bigger time sports. There is a much more adversarial role between the athlete and the media covering that athlete, especially the younger generation media guys. I've been around long enough that I have some relationships with certain people in sports where I can overcome that. But if you're a young guy today and you're starting your career in media, you're never going to get a chance to get close to these guys because, they don't really have time for you. They don't want to have time for you. So you're going to have to basically be part of the pack. It's harder today for a media person to develop a personal relationship with the team or person or player or coach that they're covering compared to, say, 30 years ago. And I think that's a major problem. I mean, I think that's, the closeness, the kinship, it's just too many, it's too much noise out there. So the athlete says, the heck with it, I'm not dealing with it. And the media's got to deal with his, he's got to create his own brand. He has to stand out. So he has to do things a little uncharacteristic of what a media member should do going back 25, 30 years. So I mean, it's a very tricky situation. I don't envy anybody starting his career now in radio, TV, or anything else. It's very much harder than it was in my day. Much harder.
Yeah, it's got to be because there are so many of the blogs, everything else there, and sometimes you read, because everybody's on social media and it all pops up there, and you don't know, who is this guy talking to me? I don't know who this guy is. Where did he get this information? Is it true information? And it's really hard. And the thing is, like you said, it's harder to start now getting into this profession. When you and I were growing up, we wanted to be the athlete, or we wanted to be Bruce. If we could be him.
Exactly. But I wanted to be Dick Enberg.
Yeah, I mean, but now these kids want to be you, want to be on a major network talking sports. What kind of advice would you give a kid coming out and trying?
Well, I would give him the old school advice because that's the only thing I know and it worked for me. I would tell a kid to, say a college kid who graduated school and he had some college broadcasting experience. I would tell that kid to go to a certain town, and I would tell him to work for a station in a city, radio or TV, depends what it was, that had an identity. KMOX in St. Louis, KABC in LA, FAN in New York. Mm-hmm. Now those jobs are hard to get. But that's what I would tell a kid to do. I would tell him to go to a place that had a long history of standing out as a good media outpost. I would not tell him to start his own podcast. I would not tell him to, write a blog. There's a million people who do that. You need to go to a town, work for a good station in, WHAS in Louisville is a good city. Go there, do a sports talk program, and people listen to that station. They listen to KMOX in St. Louis. They listen to KNBR in San Francisco. Figure out a way to get there, get on the air, and do your thing. That's what I would explain to the kid. Now listen, not a ton of money. You can't be married and having 3 kids if you're going to go move to a TMJ in Milwaukee. I mean, so it's a solitary existence. At least at the early part. But that's what I would tell a person. Now, a lot of people would do it a lot differently than I would. They would go to a team and work for the ball club and go up that channel and be a play-by-play guy for the team. Now, you want to do that, that's fine. But I'm a talk show host, so I don't look at it that I'm going to be working for a ball club and then doing what they want me to do. I want to work on a radio station where I give you all my opinions on all the sports. And to do that, you got to do a sports talk show. You got to go to a big station where you're going to be heard.
Right.
Those jobs are hard to get. Don't get me wrong, but that's what I would recommend somebody doing. If you really believed in yourself and you could do it, that's what I would do.
When you look at sports media right now, is it a good time? Is it a worrisome time? How do you feel?
Well, there's plenty of opportunity. I mean, there's a million places doing some level of sports media. But I think the biggest thing that you'd have is that to stand out and to make a name for yourself, it's very difficult. So that makes people think that I got to do something outlandish because that's the only way people are going to notice me.
Right.
The go about it the proper way and pay your dues and climb up the ladder and just be diligent. People don't seem to want to do that anymore and pay your dues. They don't seem to want to do that anymore. They want to jump right in and make a name for themselves. And then, and how loud can I be? And listen, nobody's more louder than me. But I think that's what a lot of people, want to do today. And I think that makes it tricky. I mean, I think to separate yourself from the pack in 2018 in sports media is, first off, you can't write. The newspapers, the newspaper industry is not the same. So to become a columnist for a town's newspaper, that's kind of dried up. That's kind of a dead end. So I don't know. You can write on the internet. You can do that. But I'm talking about broadcasting. If you want to broadcast, I would still say for a kid out of Syracuse, Ithaca, Northwestern, a good school, I would figure out a way to get a job at a good-sized market that's got a good radio station. And there's about 2 or 3 a town. in a good town that's got some sports teams. That's what I would do. Now, I did this in 1982.
Right.
So, I mean, this is 36 years ago.
Right.
So I don't know if that's the way to go about doing it, but that's the first thing that I would try to do.
You know, talking about that, I mean, when you came into the New York market, it was a great time, actually.
Oh, I had all the great teams. Yeah.
I mean, the Giants were here on the way up. The Jets were competitive. St. John's basketball, which is going by the wayside. I mean, Big East basketball. The Yankees were good.
I had the football Giants in 1990 won a Super Bowl. I mean, when I started really in the late 80s, I mean, I had 2 championships with the Giants. I got here in 87. The Giants won in 86. They won in 90. I had the Knicks with Riley, who had a 4 or 5 year period with then Van Gundy.
You had the Mets.
I had the Mets, who were always 86, they were great. 87, 88, they were good. And then it became a nightmare, but that was fun too with Coleman and Saberhagen and all those guys.
Yeah.
So I had that. And then I had Torrey come with the Yankees after those terrible years in the early 90s. First off, you had Steinbrenner.
Yeah.
And you always had him to talk about. Then you had Torrey beginning, well, first Buck in 94, 95, then Torrey, and then they won all those championships. And then I had the Rangers who won in 94. So I had a lot of teams that were good. I had the Rangers won a title. The Giants won 2. That's 3. The Yankees won 4. That is 7. St. John's. The Knicks were good. The Jets had some moments where they made the playoffs. I had a lot of teams that do well. And if you have teams that do well and you're in that town doing radio or TV, you're going to do well. And that's where I was fortunate.
But you see, sometimes people sit there and they say sports talk radio, it's better when the team is not doing well.
For a while it is.
It is. Yeah, because
for a while.
It is like right now, it's not a great time for New York sports. You got the Yankees who seem to be.
Oh, the Yankees are going to be good, but the Mets, how many times can you kill the Mets? You do it 10 days in a row, and the Mets, then you can't do it anymore.
Yeah, exactly. It's like,
the Jets, how many times can you kill them? You do it for the first 4 or 5 games of the season, then you can't do it anymore. You want the team to be good on a week-to-week basis. I mean, you want a little controversy, you want a bad loss thrown in, you want that. But the better the team does historically, the better the town does media-wise, whether it's the radio station, the TV ratings, newspapers, people buy the papers. So the better the team, sports-wise, normally the better you do if you're covering them as a broadcaster or as a TV columnist or radio columnist or a newspaper columnist or as a TV broadcaster.
When you look at the New York sports right now, the landscape, can the Mets get out of where they are? Is it going to be a long, arduous
the Mets have
thing?
been unlucky. Their starting pitching has not quite been as developed and dominant as we thought because with Harvey and Matz has always been injured and Wheeler really hasn't. Pitching better now, but still, they still got the 2 guys at the top of the rotation. But they have, they got a lot of injuries, and they do not have a good farm system. The way to go today in baseball is to go to the younger player, not the older player. And the Mets have a lot of older players. They gave Bruce 3 years, $40 million, hasn't done anything. They gave Cespedes a big contract, 4 years, $100 million, hasn't done anything. So they gave Frazier 2 years, 30-something. They gave him a good contract, but he's been hurt a little bit. The way to go, the Mets went older offensive player, younger pitcher. The pitching has gotten better, but they can't hit now. And they haven't scored any runs. So they and they have no great farm system. So that makes it a very tricky situation. Plus their payroll is what it is. And then if they don't sign the veteran player, the media is all over them. They don't want to spend any money.
Exactly.
So they're damned if they do, damned if they don't. The way to go about it is the way the Yankees have done it. The Yankees have a $180 million payroll. They made a lot of good trades to get good people from the farm system. They made the trade with Andrew Miller. They made the trade with Chapman. And they got Torres, their second baseman. They got Frazier to play the outfield. They got lucky with Judge. I don't think they ever thought he'd be this good. Sanchez is going to be a very good player. And then they supplement. They got Severino. They were fortunate. He's found himself. Then they supplement it with a lot of payroll. And they can go bring a Stanton in. So that helps them too. They make some good trades. Hicks develops. And they may have hit the perfect storm.
But they're the anomaly because Houston had to go into the tank to rebuild.
Correct. Yeah.
And that's kind of really
Cubs,
where the
tank. Yep.
That's kind of where the Mets probably would have to go.
Yeah, they'd have to trade a couple of these pitchers. And if you do that, it's hard to do that in New York City.
It is.
But if they really wanted to replenish things and build for the future, they're going to have to trade DeGrom. You know, they're going to have to trade. He's 30 years old. He's not making a ton of money, and he's not a free agent for a couple of years. They're going to have to go trade him, and they're going to have to get 4 or 5 young prospects. Now, then their fan base is going to go crazy. They're going to have to trade him to a team that's got a deep farm system that's ready to win, a la the Yankees.
Yeah.
And so the Met fans are going to have to see DeGrom win for the Yankees. That becomes a disaster.
Oh, yeah.
The Mets are in a very tricky situation as a franchise. They got the Yankees 6 miles away. They should be a big market team. There's all the Madoff thing has hurt their finances, so they don't spend as much money as they should normally. They're in a very tricky spot, the Mets. So I'm not sure what they're dwarfed by the Yankees.
Yeah.
They can't spend what the Yankees can, and right now they don't have the farm system the Yankees can. So they're in a tricky spot right now.
Now, we were talking about the U.S. Open at Shinnecock. You've played out there. You've been out there. You know it well. The first day, tough on a bunch of big names.
Yeah, it sure is, yeah.
For a fan getting out there, you've been to these events.
Right.
How tricky is it to get out? I mean, Long
Well,
Island.
you got to make a commitment to go.
Yeah.
You know, especially like Shinnecock, and Bethpage, and the golf in Long Island. The Belmont, you go, there's 90,000 people there. In the old 20 years ago, I loved to go to all the events. I'm not as big on going to them as I used to be because you waste your whole day and you're there. Golf's different. You're outside. It's warm weather. It's sunshine. You can walk around. So there's nothing else going on in sports. You're not missing anything. But you go to Shinnecock, to get here from where we live, it's a 3.5-hour commute.
Yeah.
And it's going to take you 2 hours to park your car.
Right.
And you're going to be dealing with 40, 50,000 people once you get there. So if you want to go follow a big player, you're going to have to walk the course with them. And if you get around the greens and around the tee box, you're 8 deep. So, I mean, it's an effort. Going to sporting events is a young man's game. Because it's an all-day affair. It's a young man's game.
Yeah.
It's not an older man's game. I would prefer in a lot of ways to watch the event at home. Going to a football game on a Sunday afternoon, that's a major pain in the neck.
It is.
And the whole day's at a football game.
I
got to deal with the traffic. I got to deal with unruly fans at times, sometimes cold weather, long stoppages when they play the commercials. Traffic out of the building, personal seat licenses. It's a major pain in the neck.
I sound like my father when I talk about it now because he used to tell me, "Why do you want to go to the game? We can watch 2 at home."
Yeah, exactly. I feel my father never wanted to take me to Yankee games. Go to the old Yankee Stadium is a pain in the neck for him, and now I understand why. I do it. There are times I take the kids to sporting events. You always have to, but I've been to a million of them. And I've been to a lot of them recently with the World Series because of the Baseball Network. I've been to a million World Series games.
Right.
And it's a major, a lot of times I leave the World Series games in the 7th and 8th inning and watch the last 2 innings in my hotel because I don't want to be sitting in traffic for 2.5 hours out of the parking lot.
Right.
Dodger Stadium last year. That parking lot out of Dodger Stadium is a major pain in the neck. I watched the Astros celebrate at the downtown LA Biltmore. That's what you do because I don't want to be getting home at 2 o'clock in the morning. And at Shinnecock, I sent my kid to Shinnecock today. He went with 3 buddies. God forbid when he gets home at 11 o'clock at night. I don't want to do that in my day.
When you look back on your career, did you ever have an inkling it would be?
Oh, God,
no.
God, no.
I mean,
I just did the sports I'm going to sneeze here in a minute, Jerry. I've had bad allergies, but I just do the sports on a day-to-day basis. I don't look at it from a standpoint of where I might be, where I was going to go. And I just get through the day and I try to do a quality show as much as I possibly can. And now I got to do the TV, so I try to do the same thing there. It's funny. I was at Shinnecock Tuesday, and I know LaCava, the caddy for Tiger, he calls Tiger over and Tiger listens. Made my day. That's the last thing I ever thought of. The Tiger bouncing around Jupiter, Florida would have me on preset, Mad Dog Radio, and listen. So that was exciting. But I try not to get too wrapped up in it because you got to do a daily show every day. You're on 15 to 20 hours a week. That's a lot of airtime, not a ton of commercials. And I try to be in a situation there where I try to do as good a job as I can and not so much worry about where, wow, if I do this, I can get to that. I try not to worry about the celebrityhood of it. Like the kid who follows Durant, and he's more strapped up in Durant's celebrityhood than he is whether he can make a 25-foot jump shot to win a championship. I'm more wrapped up in doing the daily business, daily do them of the sports talk. I'm more wrapped up getting in there every day or whatever time I have to get in there, decent hour of baseball, and then do a good 3-hour radio show. And when I do a good 3-hour radio show, I feel better than if somebody wants to interview me or something along those lines. I want to do a good show every day. And then when a day I don't want to do it is the day I got to quit.
Well, I tell you, you have done it for over 30 years for us, yeah. And really, I got to thank you for your time tonight. Really, it's been a pleasure talking to you and what you brought to the table tonight. Really, love to have you back some other time when you can.
Phil. Great to have you. Great to be here.
Hey, thank you, Chris Russo, for being in the scene. Thank you, Kevin, Mitch, and Steve for making the magic happen. This is Joe Ryan with the Stamford Sports Scene. See you next time.
Good job, Joe.
Thank you very much,
Thank you,
sir.
pal.
Been a pleasure.